Matrix Resurrections. Okay. The only good movie in the Matrix trilogy, the original trilogy, was the first one. Although I did enjoy some of the battle scenes and Revolutions, but I don't think anyone really liked the last two films. I hated the middle one. That whole scene with the architect, I didn't understand what the hell they were talking about. So now we have Matrix Resurrections. And for me, I want to say, first of all, I fell asleep twice in this movie. So that kind of tells you where this is going to go, right? For me, imagine that architect scene being the basis of your entire film, where there's a lot of people standing around giving you exposition because the screenplay just doesn't make any sense. That was this movie for me. This movie felt like it was made by a team that didn't really want to make this film. I was taken out of the movie at the very beginning because there's a lot of uber meta references in this film. I'm not going to give anything away. I didn't understand the movie enough to give anything away, that I could give anything away. But the movie starts off with the Matrix trickle down green letters and numbers sequence. And that's a running theme, visual theme throughout this film. That was pretty clever. You see it in the raindrops on numerous window panes. You see it in raindrops on window panes that have green lights on the back of them, so that the raindrops coming down, trickling down on the windows look like the Matrix code. You see it in lights on the side of buildings. Very well done. The movie looks great, but in terms of cohesiveness and coherence, totally out the window. So we got Neo, Thomas Anderson, aka John Wick, because the guy looks like John Wick. I don't know what that choice was, but he is a video game designer, and he is famous for having designed a Matrix video game. And at the very beginning of the movie, we see him in a scene where he's talking to either his partner or his supervisor, talking about how Warner Brothers wants him to release a fourth Matrix video game. So he's already done a trilogy of Matrix video games. See how they do that? He's already done a trilogy of Matrix video games, and they want him to release a fourth one. It's almost like the filmmakers are making fun of the fact that they are even bothering to make a new Matrix film, as though they are sticking it to Warner Brothers by saying, we know this is going to be, a money grab. So if that's the reference you have for the franchise, why should I care? It took me right out of the movie. After that, the movie for me became just a series of Easter eggs and fanboy callbacks to the previous trilogy. So much so that in every other scene, up until roughly the middle of the film, they keep flashing back to clips from the original trilogy. Now, there's something, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's something that has to do with Neo apparently doesn't realize who he is and what took place. And I guess he's having these flashbacks back to the original Matrix stories in the original trilogy. It just didn't work for me. And then we have characters like Morpheus, who's played by, I don't know the brother's name. His first name is Yaya. He plays Morpheus, and there's a convoluted reason why it's not Lawrence Fishburne playing Morpheus. Although I suspect that the real reason Lawrence Fishburne is not playing Morpheus is because he read the script and said, nah, I'm too old for this shit. So they give a whole convoluted reason why it's not Fishburne playing Morpheus. I don't buy any of it. Even though we saw Neo defeat the machines and in effect destroy the Matrix, as far as I remember, I haven't seen those movies, in a while, maybe a decade or so. The Matrix is just back. It's just back. And there may have been an explanation how that happened. There is an explanation as to how Neo exists and how Trinity exists. I don't think that's a spoiler. Trinity is in this movie. Neil Patrick Harris is a shining spot in this film. Neil Patrick Harris plays a therapist that Neo is visiting because Neo, as I alluded to earlier, is having all of these visions that point to the previous Matrix trilogy. But Neil Patrick Harris, his character, factors in very heavily towards the latter part of the film. And there is one scene in this movie that involves Trinity, where Neo goes to warn her about something, and Neil Patrick Harris is there, and there's an effect. I don't want to ruin anything. There's an effect that is very used very well in this movie. Think about X-Men First Class, when the penny travels through Kevin Bacon's head. There's a scene in this film that's almost as dynamic as that. The scene is, again, like a lot of the things, loaded with exposition, but it worked for me. It was tension-filled, very well written, but I'm telling you, that's the only scene that mattered to me whatsoever. I don't believe it's a spoiler to say that Jada Pinkett's Niobe returns to this film. She's under some questionable aging makeup. I didn't think it was that bad. As a matter of fact, I thought it was so convincing. I didn't realize it was Jada Pinkett until maybe a couple scenes in. So I thought she was a bright spot in this film as well. The Asian American actress who played Colleen Wing in the Netflix Iron Fist series, she plays a character named Bug. I thought she was very captivating as well. I didn't really like her that much. I thought she was skilled in Iron Fist, but I made the point of saying that the camera didn't really like her for Colleen Wing. I just didn't see it. But here, she's great. She's charming, captivating. The camera held on her. She really held the lens, unlike in Iron Fist. I gotta tell you, for me, the worst performance in the movie, I hate to say it because he's my man, is Keanu Reeves. Watching him in this movie, I just felt like he was constantly in a drug haze stupor. After investing all of what we invested in the first three movies to see Neo's evolution and to see him become pretty much a superhero, I'm just telling you, we didn't get any of that in this film. He demonstrates one power, and that's it. And he seems like he's drug-addled while he's doing that. I don't think anyone would be taken to task if they said Keanu Reeves is not necessarily the best actor. But for the most part, he's choosing roles, I would say, at least all the films I've seen, where his limitations don't work against him. The characters don't really ask for that much from him. This one, I think it did ask a lot for him, and he does not deliver. He is the weakest aspect of this movie besides the screenplay itself. In my opinion, this film was more concerned about, again, doing things that would look cool, or that the filmmakers thought were cool concepts. There's a couple of things. There's this thing called the swarm mode that I just thought was kind of stupid. And there's a scene that I think is very disrespectful to some of the events that happened in 9/11. I don't want to say anything more than that. But yeah, this was not the film for me. I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to end it right here. As of now, but now let me back up. I didn't realize that this thing is on HBO Max. So I went to the theaters to see it. And again, I fell asleep twice. Maybe part of that's because I was tired, but there was nothing happening that seemed fresh or original to me whatsoever. But I want to watch it again on HBO Max. As of now, my review, I'm going to give this 1 wheel. 1 out of 5. And it is easily the worst film I've seen this year. But I will watch it again, and if I get some time, I will re-review it. I rewatched Matrix Resurrections on HBO Max last night. I have another compliment to give the movie. I was kind of rough on the movie, but I have a compliment now. It looks great on my OLED screen. Sounds great on my Dolby Digital 5.2, whatever the hell it is, surround. Sounds amazing. My subwoofer awesome. Movie still, it's the worst movie I've seen this year. For all the reasons I said before. I rewatched it. I rewound some sections 3 or 4 times just so I could make sure I understood why certain things were happening in the film. And suffice it to say, the dialogue was so trite or so just non-explicative, if that's a word, that it didn't matter. These films are just like Star Wars. It's like, doesn't matter how many times the rebels defeat the Empire. If they want to make a new Star Wars movie, okay, there's a new Empire. So the first trilogy, the one I grew up on, it's clear they defeat the Empire. Now, I expect there to be some remnants every now and then, but then the next trilogy comes, or I'm talking about the recent trilogy, not the prequels, but the recent trilogy. And it's not the Empire, it's the First Order. That's the whole mentality nowadays. If they want to get a franchise back up and running, doesn't matter. They don't have to come up with a viable reason how the conflict begins or how the antagonist comes back. They just come back. One classic franchise where they kind of did the same thing, but they justified it, was the Alien franchise. The first movie, Alien, back in 1979, where they go to a planet and there's an alien on it. Well, Aliens, which followed up, Ridley Scott directed the first Alien, then there was James Cameron with Aliens. There's a good reason why we're seeing the aliens all over again, because they determined that they have to go back to the planet where the aliens are from. Okay, simple. There's no valid explanation why the Matrix has come back into existence other than, well, they didn't really defeat it the first time. And there's another element in this movie that I'm not going to spoil that will put you in the framework of the Wonder Twins from the Super Friends. They introduce an element in this film that we had no reason to believe would ever be the case from the first trilogy. And I hate it when films do that, when franchises do that, when they rewrite things just so they can add something quote-unquote fresh to the new movie that's coming up 10 years later after the original franchise. They do that in this film. There's another scene in this film I alluded to in my previous review, and I'm going to spoil this. There's this thing called the swarm mode, where they don't use agents anymore, but people who are in the Matrix, and this is the world that we think really exists. People can be inhabited by the coding and become agents. And there's what I consider to be a disgraceful scene where the villain of the piece, I'm not going to reveal anything, the villain of the piece causes everyone in the city to jump out of windows and use them as bombs to try to stop our heroes from escaping the city on a motorbike. I just thought that scene was very, very ugly, and I thought it was disrespectful to what happened on 9/11. Those of us who were living up in the area at the time and saw the documentaries of bodies dropping from the buildings, I just thought that was really, I can't think of the word, totally unnecessary for the storytelling at this level of this movie. I've gone back and forth with some people who, man, it doesn't matter what flaw you find in this film, they're going to justify it, they're going to rationalize it. They don't want to hear any type of logical reasoning as to why the screenplay just sets its own rules and then breaks them. And believe me, this screenplay breaks some rules from the original trilogy. And I already alluded to the fact that there's one big element that to me is just so much of a cheat that it's, and there's a little bit of, social agenda, which when done right works well. Here, it does not work well. It's so blatantly obvious and pandering. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. I will reiterate there's some great performances. I thought Jada Pinkett was great. The woman who played in Iron Fist, I can't remember her name, and that's Jennifer or Jenny's, I forget her name. She plays Bugs. She's good. Yaya is good as the new Morpheus. There's even a cameo by Toma Hopkins. Yet to be a person of a certain age to know who that is. But she's covered up in aged makeup as well. But it's cool to see her name in the credits. That was great. I'm glad to see her in this film for as briefly even as she's in it. And you won't recognize her. Yeah, some good performances. The Indian woman who married one of the Jonas brothers, I can't remember, Priyanka Chopra, I believe her name is. She's in this. She's great too. Great performances, but just some of the most ridiculous dialogue, some of the most leaden dialogue, some of the most expository dialogue to explain stuff that's happening. And I guess, like I said, in today's world of filmmaking, you could just say something like, well, when the two of you get together, bad things happen. And that is supposed to explain everything that we see there on out, and we just have to accept it, because that little bit of innocuous dialogue should be enough to explain what happens. To me, a better film would have been seeing our heroes fight the antagonist who's trying to recreate the Matrix. That would have been a better film to me. And maybe towards the third act of the film, the antagonist does recreate the Matrix, but then our heroes find a way to defeat the antagonist. Oh, and there's also a cameo by a Pokemon character. Kujaku, I believe. I don't know. So anyway, listen, if you're a Matrix fan, you'll probably like this. If you're a person who likes consistency, you like a script that plays by its own rules, and you like the bringing back of a franchise that keeps the previous franchise as hallowed ground or hallowed canon or material, you won't like this film at all. As a matter of fact, one of the people I was talking to said that a person that was sitting in the theater where he was watching this got up and left nearly within an hour before the film came to an end. I feel you, brother. I get it. So I know nothing I say is going to stop you from checking it out, so go check it out. You got any issues with what I said, or you don't like what I said, hey, bring it on. I'll take all comers. Leave your comments down below. All right, guys. With that, this is the Martini.